Welcome to the Love Lab Podcast, the place to be for honest and real talk about relationships and sex. Whether you're a man or woman, single or a couple, this is the show for you. I am your host, Kevin Anthony, and I am here to help you have the relationship of your dreams and the best sex of your life. All right, welcome back to the Love Lab Podcast. This is episode 339, and it is titled The Realities of Having a Large Penis, a conversation with the man with the world's largest penis. So one of the things that I see in my practice a lot is men who stress over the fact that they think their penis is too small. And they all wish that they had much larger penises than they actually do. But interestingly enough, because I coach both men and women, I tend to hear from the women. And the women are telling me that they don't necessarily need a particularly large penis. And many of them will actually say that if it's too big, it's potentially a problem for them. I also have had clients in the past who did have very large penises and struggled with how to use them to, say, not hurt their partner or to make sex more enjoyable, because there are some things that maybe you can or can't do if there's a big mismatch in size. And so that's what we want to talk about today. And we're going to talk about it with my guest, who is the world record holder for the largest penis. And we're just going to have a conversation about his life and the realities of it, what works for him and what doesn't work for him, and what he's learned, and any advice he might have for people who are dealing with similar situations. So that's what we're going to talk about on today's show. But before we do that, a short word from my sponsor, Power and Mastery 3.0. Power and Mastery 3.0 is the latest version of the popular men's sexual mastery course. If you are struggling with erectile dysfunction, premature ejaculation, or simply want to increase your skills in the bedroom, then Power and Mastery is for you. Join the exclusive club of men who have taken their sexual performance into their own hands and become sexual masters. Mastering your sexuality is a key component to becoming the man she has always dreamt of and craves. Don't leave your sexual performance up to chance or the throw of the dice. Become a sexual master today by going to powerandmastery.com and joining the exclusive club of men who have taken their destiny into their own hands. That's powerandmastery.com. Okay, my guest today is Matt Barr, and he is known for holding the title of the man with the world's largest penis, a distinction that has been medically confirmed. His story gained public attention through the Channel 4 documentary, My Massive Cock, and a guest appearance on the UK's This Morning, where he candidly discussed the personal and social challenges that come with his extraordinary size. I'm going to leave out the part of the bio that says what the size is, because we're going to talk about that in a moment. Welcome to the show, Matt.
Hello, how's it going?
Good. So I want to start by just talking a little bit about your background. So first of all, everyone wants to know, how large is your penis? We got to just get that out of the way right from the start.
I mean, well, first off, obviously, there's some variation in it. It's not like it's always the same thing. I'm more suspicious when someone says, I'm X size, because realistically, certainly the bigger you get, there's more fluctuation in size. So on basically over 14, nearly 14 and a half on a good day. On a bad day, more like a bit over 12 maybe. But there's in that kind of range. And that's obviously erect. Soft, maybe more like 10 and a half, typically. Or again, a lot of fluctuation around that. And then girth about 8 and a half, depending on, exact levels of arousal.
And I think is one of the things that's interesting about that is, roughly 14-ish erect, 12-ish, 12 and a half-ish flaccid, right? So what I think is interesting about that is a lot of times when guys will see another man who has a really large penis, like let's say they're at a nude beach or they're in the locker room or wherever they are, and they see a man that has a really large penis, they go, oh my God, if it's that big when it's soft, it must be enormous when it's huge. And one of the things that I recognize from the numbers that you've given here is that it doesn't actually get that much bigger.
It doesn't some people do think, it's going to double or something. Like, no, that would be ridiculous. That would be impossible. But I think you could walk through the street, you pass out instantly. I get a bit lightheaded, but that would be medically impossible. No, I think it's still like some growth, but it's certainly not again, it's more of a shower than a grower, certainly. And I think if people are comparing like for like, it's very different. Although, of course, there are some men who part of the reason they would like to have a large one, it's for that reaction. They'd rather, in some ways, be bigger soft than they care about being bigger hard. If that makes sense. Because
Yeah,
it's
but
other men's reactions.
believe it or not, you're absolutely correct about that, because I have had a really prominent urologist who specializes in male enhancement on the show. And
Mm.
we talked extensively about all the different methods for making a man's penis larger. And a lot of them do not actually increase the size when it's
Yes.
erect. They only make it appear bigger when it's soft. And so we had
Like
that whole
cutting the
discussion.
tunica and all that stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's like, why? So my question to him at the time was, why would you do it if it doesn't make it bigger when it's
Yeah.
hard? And his answer was exactly what you just said. It's just because they'd rather be a shower.
Yeah.
But, you know, I really want to make the point for, men who are listening to this, like the average man, we know that the average size of a male penis is about 5 inches. Right. And so when it's soft, it's probably half that. Right. So it probably does about double in size.
Exactly.
And I just want people, men who might have penises on the smaller size to understand that if you see a man that has a particularly large flaccid penis, it doesn't mean that it's going to be double that size. Right. So I kind of want men to feel a little bit more okay about that.
Yeah. And even if it does, I don't think it will, like, again, people get that idea of like, wouldn't it be great if I had this instrument and all the reactions you'd get? People think about it from those very specific moments where it's going to be really positive, like the locker rooms or something, or to impress someone, I don't know, in a romantic situation, perhaps just to get that shock factor. They don't think about what it's like the rest of the time, when you're going to work or on a commute or something. It's just these things where it's not a positive to have. Anything, you kind of want to be more. The fact that the average penis is, half the size and gets bigger, that's much more ideal typically than it being big all the time and then a bit bigger erect.
Yeah, I completely agree. We're going to talk about some of the realities of where it's not so convenient in a moment. One other thing that I want to cover just before we get into that is, how was it discovered that you had the world's, like, how do you end up holding the title for world's largest penis?
Well, I mean, you have to give it a bit of a caveat in terms of that, because obviously there's 4 billion men on the planet. They've not been measured, so there could easily be someone out there who's bigger. So the caveat is it's the largest one that's been medically verified by urological tests. So there's actually been people to examine it by an independent study. So it's bigger than any of those. Because the previous record, I think, was 10.6, something like that. That had been actually logged anywhere as part of a study. So it's bigger by that standard. That's not to say, there could be a whole tribe of people out there who somehow are bigger. But again, it's just based on what's normal. And again, it's just so outside the norm that it's basically, well, I spoke to the lawyers about this for the book, and they said, oh, given all the evidence on your side, it makes sense. You can call your book that and you can have that title. It's fine until proven otherwise, I suppose.
But was there an ad in a journal? We're looking for the man, guys with large penises apply. Like, how did you end up?
Yeah, it was for the documentary. That's how it was, basically. And I wasn't going to do the show originally. And I was always very cautious about it. So on the show, I said, just give me my flaccid size, not my erect size. I said, when you show it, just show me, because there's a scene where I leave a very cold body of water. So I wanted to kind of, again, give more of a, like, that's not a, what's the word, fluff size, or not a, it'd be very easy to give, like, because a lot of the men on the show were OnlyFans promoters, so they had a very different angle, I think. So I think the reason I wanted to take part was to try and give my point of view, which is a bit different than that point of view. And I spoke to them about it. Obviously, I said, "Oh, I don't want to go on the show, blah blah blah." But then eventually, they sort of talked me around to doing it, and then it's all kind of come from there. I got a lot of positive feedback from people, so I want to hear more of your story. Obviously, the documentary, it's got its own angle as well. So to give it my take on it and everything that's happened since, it's been quite a whirlwind journey. So yeah, basically that's been an opportunity to be more open about it, and it's thankfully had mostly positive outcome.
Okay, that makes more sense. Now I understand how you ended up getting that title.
Yeah.
All right.
Because Guinness doesn't do it, just to clarify. So it's not a Guinness record because no one's a Guinness record holder. Again, Guinness is very much, you got to pay them a lot of money to even get seen. So it's like 20 grand, and they don't even do this record anyway, but some of the other ones do, like the World Record Academy. It's like 15 grand just to get seen. So it's a bit much for what it is.
Yeah, and
Very
what does that
corporate.
really get you anyway,
Exactly,
right?
that's what I mean. It's like, people will say it when they say it. It's not like it's too much difference anyway.
Well, one of the things that I do appreciate about you, Matt, is that I haven't seen the documentary,
Okay.
but I know that when we talked about, what we were going to talk about on this show, you were very open about it and wanting to share your story in the hopes that it could help people. And I know that at the end, what you're going to be promoting is also something that is around helping people. So I think that's admirable that you're willing to be that public about it. And it's not just about, look at me, I have a
Yeah.
giant penis. It's more about how can we use this to help people. So I appreciate that.
I mean, there's just so many myths around in pornography and OnlyFans, especially now. A lot of people can just, do what they want to spread rumors, and just, it can be like a marketing tool necessarily more than it is an actual biological reality. So I think trying to come from the point of view of someone who's not trying to do a thirst trap and is just trying to be honest about the issues that you get with it is a different angle. It's something that's worth exploring.
Yeah, and that's really what I wanted to talk about today. The bulk of it is the issues associated with it. So let's just get into it. I mean, from your personal experience, what have been some of the challenges that you've had in your own life? And you can talk about just life. You mentioned, on a long trip somewhere, and then also in your relationships and sex life.
Yeah, there are two very different kind of angles there. But I think the main difference, or the biggest difference, I think, is that sense of your own skin. Because people, often people will say, "Oh, what are you complaining about for being?" But any time you're noticeably different, then and there's no one quite like you, at least, or very few people quite like me, no one that you know, at least, or even know of, really, it becomes more challenging, and your sense of self is different because you aren't part of the norm. So when it becomes part of your identity as well, people just think that's kind of who you are. So I've always not wanted to talk about this publicly until kind of now, because I'm secure enough in myself to be at that point where I can say, okay, this is who I am, take it or leave it, blah, blah. It's not going to define me just because you think this about me. Whereas again, when you're younger and impressionable, and that's, everyone knows you as the big dick guy, then you kind of, it can be very, very, have a different impact on your self-esteem. And it becomes like, is that, if you do meet someone, is that why they're interested in you, et cetera, et cetera? So you do kind of lose that kind of confidence, I suppose, in some ways. People always think, oh, it's going to be, big dick means big confidence, but it's not, because you have that psychological issue with it, and then obviously the practical issues we'll get into.
Yeah. So it sounds to me, well, two things there that I heard you say. One of them is something that a lot of times women feel also, like, when women are very beautiful and they're very voluptuous, maybe they have big breasts, and they feel like people only see them for their boobs or for, their bodies in general or their looks, right? And they feel like, but there's more to me than just that, right? And so I hear that you're kind of saying the same thing. Like, when everybody knows you're the guy with the big dick, they're like, oh, he's just the big dick guy, right? And you're like, well, wait a minute, hold on, there's a whole person here, right?
Yeah, I think it's even worse. It's the same with like someone who's very rich if he's being used for the wealth. But I think it's worse because you don't have the same benefits. Like, obviously wealth comes with it huge amounts of benefits, and like beauty, it's something that kind of, you look at someone's face and you know it instantly. Whereas obviously in my case, I mean, you can see a bulge, but other than that, it's not like something that is going to improve your life on a day-to-day basis in the same way the other things have more of an obvious uplift. It's something like, it has some benefits, but it's not, a universally good thing, shall we say, even with the drawbacks. There are so many problems that come with it. It's just certain people who do think it is, because they've seen too much porn, they think that's the ideal.
Right. Well, and I mean, obviously regular porn movies for sure perpetuate, like, this is something I tell people all the time. It's like, do not judge yourself based on what you see in porn movies, because they always, of course, pick men with above average size penises. But even it's really funny. This was not planned at all, by the way, but I had mentioned yesterday to my girlfriend that I'd never seen the movie Boogie Nights. And so last night we actually watched that movie. And for listeners, if you've never seen the movie or you're not familiar with it, it is a movie about a young man who has a very large penis who gets into the porn industry. It's supposedly very loosely based on John Holmes' life, I think. So I had never seen it before, and we're watching the movie, and that thing that you mentioned is, every time somebody in the movie sees it, they show the expression on their face, and they're like, Right? This is like, oh my
Yeah,
God, kind of a look on
yeah.
their face. Of course, I had to make the comment to my girlfriend. I said, "It's so weird that we decided to watch this movie tonight because did you know I'm actually
Yeah.
interviewing the man with the world's
Yeah.
largest penis
Yeah.
tomorrow morning?"
It's a very relatable movie. Yeah. And it came out when I was quite, yeah, I think it was like 98, wasn't it? So when I was like a teenager still. So yeah.
Yeah, somewhere around there, 97,
Yeah.
98 ish,
Yeah.
something like that. But okay, let's talk about some of the potential challenges just in day-to-day life with having a penis that big.
Yeah. I mean, so it's more a case of there are complications as opposed to, I don't like think of it as challenges too much in the sense of, it's not that it stops you from doing things. It's not much, but you have to be very careful with what you're doing. You've got to be very cautious with your things. Like you can't just choose an outfit based on what you think looks good. You've got to kind of choose something that's very baggy and has appropriate room and all those other things, which you could say, oh, everyone has to do that. Everyone has to dress to match their body type, which is true. But of course, there's very few items of clothing that are designed for men like me, realistically. Whereas even larger men, physically, whatever reason, or obesity or muscles or whatever, there is clothing designed to kind of scale up naturally, but there's not something that's based on proportionality. So you do have that issue of trying to find things that fit. And yeah, if you aren't careful, then you can kind of give people an eyeful. So it's very much a case of trying to be respectful of that. And then obviously the other issue is if you're not, or if people do see it, or even if you've done your best to cover it up, sometimes you might just move in a certain way and it's more obvious, and then you deal with the repercussions of that.
I
But you can
think
hide it anyway. It's not like impossible to hide anyway. You can like wear a muumuu or something, and then it's so I don't want to say it's completely unavoidable, but it's a reputation that kind of follows me around as well. So
yeah, that's very interesting because I'm thinking about my own experience, right, as a man, and what it's like with clothes and uncomfortable situations and things like that. And I'm thinking, man, I'm literally erect about almost exactly half your size. And I'm just like, I've already not got enough space in the clothes,
yeah,
like
yeah,
you wear a nice, like, you want to put on a nice pair of underwear for your woman and you get a little bit turned on and you're already sticking out of it, right? I can't
exactly.
even imagine. Um, that must
Yeah,
be
the teenage years
challenging.
where there's a lot more hormones going around as well, and getting more semi-aroused or something, and particularly difficult. Obviously, at my age now, it's less of an issue, but when you're younger,
Yeah.
certainly those hormones are flowing, and then yeah,
The other thing that I think is really ironic is that there is a whole subsection of men, and they make all kinds of things to literally stuff your pants to make it stick out like that.
yeah,
This is fun. This goes way back. This goes back like 20 years, I think. But a friend of mine and myself, we were getting really into martial arts, and we
mm.
were studying Muay Thai, and we were total beginners. Like we didn't know what we were doing. And so we were trying to figure out like what equipment we needed. And our coach told us we needed to go get cups, right, to protect ourselves. And we didn't know what to get. And so like we're on this is somewhat early days of the internet, right? Because it was
Mm.
20-ish
Yeah,
years ago, maybe a little more. Anyway, we're on there trying to figure out like what we need. And all I kept coming across was information online from men talking about this from the point of view of which one makes their bulge look bigger in their pants. And I'm
yeah.
like, this is not helping me.
Yeah, I've seen Spinal Tap. I know how the
Yeah,
cucumber in the pants thing.
exactly.
Yeah.
But it's just amazing to me that you have a segment of the population of men who are intentionally trying to make it look bigger and stick out in their
Mm.
pants. And then you have another section who are intentionally trying to hide it because they don't want
Yeah.
it to be sticking out. It's
I think
just,
there's an epidemic amongst men, and kind of there's always the issue is sort of with women they get too much attention and often bad attention, but it's not hard to get attention. Whereas for men, it's very much men just kind of go out there. They often don't get any affection to in some cases, and so anything they can do to kind of stand out or get any kind of looks or whatever might be
yeah.
what they do. So even if it's negative attention like that, because obviously if they knew women, they'd know that generally, for the majority of them, they're not going to be excited by that. Maybe if they like the man, they might go, ooh. Or if it's particularly huge, they might think be curious. But for the average thing, it's not going to be. They're not going to go wow, and then suddenly fall in love with you, especially if it's a fake cup or something. So
Right. Well, that's the thing that I always thought was funny. It's the same thing I think about, women who wear bras that are super padded to make their boobs a lot
yeah.
bigger. It's like at some point that bra is going to come off, right? At some point those pants are going to come down and somebody's going to go, wait a minute, that's not as big as that bulge that you
Yeah, no,
had
I
in
never
there, right?
understood that. Yeah,
That's a whole other conversation. Are there any other sort of realities, like things like I think about like sports, maybe sports might be
yeah,
difficult, right? Like, or any other things that, might be difficult or yeah.
yeah. I mean, I'm kind of fortunate or unfortunate. I've never been particularly sporty, so it's not been an issue. But again, it's sort of stuff like going to the gym. That's where you have to be very, very cautious about what you're wearing, especially, or do it like go. I used to go like really early in the morning when I used to go more regularly, um, to just to make sure avoid getting too much attention because there's again so much you can kind of, especially for the treadmill or something. So even with like compression pants and stuff like that to try and hide it, you still sometimes have some kind of a mark or like cover it with a towel and then get the treadmill and then do your thing. But I've got to the point now where I've got my own little home gym to use, so I don't have to go out as much. But yeah, obviously, if I was about to, doing football or whatever regularly, then it would be a problem. I don't know if that's part of why I've never been into it, but I think it's a combination of personality and attributes meant that it was never something I really enjoyed.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, I mean, I'm sure people are mildly curious about what it's like to walk around with the penis that large. But what
Yeah.
I really want to get into is more how it affects you and your relationships
Yeah.
and your
I
sex
mean,
life. So let's talk
on
about.
that point, though, if you wanted to do it, if people wanted to know what it was like, they could walk around with a huge bulge. But they could try it for a day, and you'd see you wouldn't get the reactions you'd want to. People seem to think, "Wow, you're gonna get this amazing reaction." I think number one, you'd be very self conscious, and number two, you're not going to get like not everyone's going to turn their head and go, "Wow, check this out." It's going to be, most people stare going, "What are you doing? Why are you showing off like that? It's weird." You know.
Yeah, it's interesting. I have a really good friend. This is a really amazing guy. He's a former Chippendales dancer, and he's quite large himself. But he always goes out of his way to cover it, hide
Yeah.
it. It's not that he's ashamed of it in any way, but he's actually really, like you said, he's just really aware of the impact it can have,
Yeah,
and he
there's a
just
time
does.
and a place for it. Like in a strip club, it's different. Like I've done strip shows and stuff in Boston, and I've been situations of various clubs where you do wear something where it is flaunting it, and then but on the day-to-day basis, 99.99% of the time, you kind of want to cover it up and just look as normal as possible.
Exactly. Yeah, that's been his experience as well.
Yeah,
So let's talk about relationships
sure.
with women. So, how has this impacted your dating life?
Well, I mean, depends how you want to look at it. In some ways, obviously, it's given me a lot more attention, a lot more action, if you want to call it that, than I would have had otherwise. But it's also made things more challenging. I've had to like learn how to be good at sex in a way that I could have probably been coasting a bit on mediocre sex if I was had a normal anatomy, because I was just like do what you kind of told in terms of what you learn, you pick it up, and it's all like okay, there's no risk of injury, there's no work required really. It's just the stuff you kind of do and you don't think about it very much. But in my case, obviously, so it's always front of mind. It's always been such a major issue in any relationship I've ever had, whether it's a one night stand or a long term thing. It's always there as a factor. So yeah, it's just kind of taught me to appreciate it more. And again, both the impact it has, and again that you can have good sex without using penis at all.
Yeah. So let's say you're dating and there's a woman that you're potentially interested in. At what point do you say, by the way, there's something you should know?
Yeah.
And how does
It
that
was,
go?
yeah, well, it's interesting ones. Like when I was younger, my reputation kind of followed me around, and I mostly sort of date people that I kind of friends of friends and stuff, and house parties. So there's always that kind of knowledge of it. And then in my more 30s, that's kind of when like late 20s, 30s. That's more when like apps were kicking off. So you meet more strangers, and that was the point where it's kind of starting to be a bit more challenging to think about. Okay, how am I going to broach this as a topic? And I've gotten better at it over time, but it's still very difficult to do, and it's purely based on the nature of the person I'm speaking to as well. Because if they're quite flirty and forward or whatever, it's easier to bring it up. But if they're more reserved, it's obviously something that kind of leave a bit later down the line, and then we decide when to actually make that statement. But it's something I definitely prefer to do it before, clothes come off where possible. But it's still, there's always the issue of it souring things.
For sure. If you're going out on dates with them, and maybe this is because of some of the stuff that we talked about earlier, like the way that you dress and find ways to hide it. But like I'm imagining if you've been on some dates yet, I mean, you haven't been to the point where clothes are coming off, like she's probably got an idea already, because it's not exactly the easiest thing to hide.
No, I mean that is true. I think it depends, because like some have a very good idea. I'll pick it up quickly, or whatever. One might even drop a hint or two in a very subtle way at some point. But I've definitely had women who had no clue at all, not to expect, because you can dress badly enough, or you mostly meet in, like, if you're meeting mostly in the evenings where it's dark and they're not making an effort to look really, or you might go to meet a restaurant, you're there first, you're already sat down, they're not going to see anything for a while. Or had dates where you meet on Zoom, on chat on Zoom before you go in person. So situations like that where there's no indication of what's down there. It's obviously different if you're going to a park or something, athletic during the day. You're going to see it a lot more. But it varies so much. I don't like to stereotype it.
So when you finally get to that situation where clothes are coming off, what is the general reaction the first time that a woman sees it?
I mean, even when they know, it is shock. I think that's the way to describe it, because they've not seen one like that realistically. Even if, and I've certainly been with women who said, "Oh, I was with an ex who was 12 inches. It's fine. I've been with a big guy before," and they see it and they go, "Oh, that guy, maybe he wasn't 12 inches. If this is what 12 inches, this is what over 12 inches are like. Then definitely this is not what I was expecting." Because I think often when you think of it as well, you're thinking it either compared to like a sex toy, where they are sized differently because they include like the insertable length. So a 12-inch dildo or something would not be 12 inches necessarily, that would be insertable, because it would be the rest is 12 inches, then like 8 inches insertable. And they're not necessarily thinking also in terms of the girth of it and like the volume and how it all kind of comes together. Even if they've got a number in their head, even if they've got that number right, they don't think about it is a 3D shape necessarily, especially not when it's right there and moving and everything. So
it's alive.
It's definitely there's a bit of just a shock factor. I think realistically, it is everything they said. So it's but again, there have been some troopers who were quite excited and keen rather than shocked, and some who've been terrified and like nope. Even with the warning. So
that was the next question I had, which is, have you ever run into a situation where a woman was like, you may have told her that you were large and she's like, okay, I've been with large men before, and then she sees it and she's just like, nope, can't.
Do it. Plenty of times, like quite a lot. I mean, realistically, in terms of not necessarily like no, leave the room, but like more like, okay, we're not going to do it tonight. Sometimes we're not going to do anything tonight, or just nothing penetrative anyway because of this. Sometimes it's it just changes things in terms of what their expectations are necessarily. Not always a hard no, but just like, okay, this is a change of plans perhaps when they see it.
Yeah, and the reason I wanted to ask that question is because I've never known anybody as large as you, but I've had a few friends over the years that had significantly large enough penises, and one of the things that they've shared with me is that this has happened to them quite often.
Yeah.
Where they meet a woman and it gets to that point where they're going to have sex and she just looks at it and is like, no way. Right.
Yeah. That's why you have to give a bit of warning, I think, especially if they haven't given warning. That's going to be even worse. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is, again, part of what I want to do with this episode is just, for all the guys who are like, man, I wish I had a penis that big. Like, I really want you to understand that, there are challenges that come with that. And, for every guy that, and I actually haven't really heard much of this, but if there are men out there that have been turned down for being too small, which generally isn't the case, most women would be like, okay, well, let's see what we can do with it, right? But on the other end of the spectrum, when you're very large, it is a reality that some women are just going to say no. And that can be, men think, oh, it's so amazing to have this big penis, but is it really amazing when a woman is like, I can't, right? Like that's, I imagine, probably rather challenging for you to deal with.
Yeah, it is. It is difficult because I'm not like the most charming or like seductive guy in terms of my own personality and stuff. So when you do meet someone who is like matches your style and everything, and you get really close, and then because of a physical reason you can't progress things, that's definitely a bit of a bummer. And you'd be like, oh, if I was average, maybe things would be very different. So you have that issue. Whereas realistically, like you say, if it's very rare someone's going to be so small that's going to have a huge impact on them. Obviously, it could be psychologically damaging, but practically, you're going to manage to do whatever you want with them. You just have to work around it. It's like if you're on the extremes, you've got to find ways to work.
Exactly. And that is what I want to talk about next. I want to pause for a short break for a second sponsor. When we come back, I want to talk about the realities of what it's like to actually have sex and how you've made that work for you, because I think there could be a lot of benefit for the men who really are larger and are going, I don't know what to do, it's not working, it hurts her, or whatever it is. I'd love to hear your advice on how you make that work. So that's what we're going to talk about on the other side of this short break. Men, are you tired of falling short in the bedroom and in your relationship? Do you want your woman to respect you and crave your cock? Do you want to be the man she secretly brags about to all her friends? What if you could become this man? What if you could not only master your masculine sexuality, but also be the dream man who shows up for his woman in all the ways she desires? What if you could become so irresistible that she becomes addicted to you? If you are ready to become that man, then go to kevinanthonycoaching.com/men. And that is kevinanthonycoaching.com/men. All right. So we've talked about, what happens when you're meeting somebody and how you sort of break the news to her, and then, what her reaction is and all that. Let's talk about the realities of what it's like, actually using it during sex. So what I'd like to know is, what, if any, challenges do you tend to have? And then what are the things that you've figured out that make sex better for you, easier for you, better for her, potentially easier for her?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it comes down to realistically, there's two aspects. There's the getting hard, getting fully roused, and everything. There's a challenge there, just because there's more to do. And then there's obviously actual penetration as well. That's challenging. So I think those are the two separate issues that I've worked on kind of my whole life, really, in terms of trying to how to figure out what's the solution to getting what's the word a square peg in a round hole type thing.
Okay, so this is interesting. This is another thing that I think a lot of men who wish they had really large penises don't necessarily realize, is that when your penis is that large, it can potentially be more difficult to achieve an erection and also maintain one, correct?
Yes, definitely. I think I'm fortunate. I think because of I'll say some of the stuff I've been doing over my life has helped to me. That's not as much of an issue as it could be, but also because it is quite large flaccid as well. There's enough blood in it at default at rest that it's not. Again, if it was, for example, going from half the size to full size, the amount of time that would take and the blood flow that would take, that would be extremely challenging.
Yeah. Is there anything that you've identified to make that easier for you? Like if you are having challenges achieving and maintaining an erection?
Yeah, I think part of it is obviously psychological. Like a lot of it is psychological in terms of you just got to be in that mood and that mindset and be able to focus on it and not be stressed out. Because I know when I was initially having, I mean, when I was younger, it was different because it was, you get hard instantly. I think wherever you are when you're like a teenager, and then as you go through life, it gets a bit more challenging. Especially, certainly cases where I had a few drinks and you go, take a go back or something, and then that's where it happens. You're like, oh my god, and then you get in your own head about it and you panic about it. And you think, oh, what if I can't do it again? What if it's gone for good? So I kind of had to, as a fairly anxious person in general, I think part of just the mindset approach of just being okay, it will take time, but it will come. Then it will be effective that way. I think there's also like constant stimulation because there's no surface area to kind of cover. So if she's doing something with it, I'm doing something with it, then that helps a lot as well. And yeah, I think before that, I think also just making sure to keep the blood flow up in general. So whatever kind of exercises, I kind of do a bit of some exercises to try and make it a bit more like fuller the rest of the time, not for any size reasons, just but because that makes it a lot easier to get erect when that happens.
And then what about penetration? So have you had challenges with that? How do you work with that?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean, there's well, there's two areas. Obviously, there's girth, which is more challenging, and there's length. Because with length, there's depth limiter rings like Come Close and all those other brands where you deliberately have something around your base or whatever as much as you need to do. So whatever kind of movement you make, you aren't going to be causing too much of a distress because you can only get 5, 6, 7 inches in. But obviously with girth, that's not really an issue. So it's much more a case of foreplay and lots and lots of foreplay and lubrication. There's not really much more around it, unfortunately. You want to find a quick fix, but there isn't one. It's just make sure they're very much in the mood, very much aware of what it's going to be a challenge, but it'll be fun.
Yeah, and you hit all three of the things I was hoping you would say. Because again,
I know I've done this enough times now.
Yeah, right. I want this to be educational, right?
Yeah.
So this is if you're a man listening and you're very large, obviously these are some things you can do. And also if you're a woman listening and your man is very large and he's not aware of these things, this would be helpful. So what are those three things? Just to reiterate what you said. Number one, really good foreplay. And like you said, girth isn't really an issue because women have the ability to really expand and take in a lot of girth. However, she's going to need enough foreplay to be really turned on. She's, like you said, got to really be in the mood, got to really be turned on. So if you are a man who's abnormally large, you're going to just have to take more time, right? You're going to have to take more time.
No quickies allowed in my life, really.
Exactly. But that's fine, actually. Most men don't take enough time with the foreplay anyway.
No, I know.
Yeah. So this is actually not really a problem. The women will love it because they want more foreplay as it is.
Yeah, that's what I find.
The second thing is obviously use lubrication, right? That's always helpful. And then the other one that you mentioned are the depth limiting rings, which are from, I've never had to use a depth limiting ring, but from my friends and clients who have, they say it's really a game changer for them.
Yeah.
So I actually, on my website at kevinanthonycoaching.com, /products. I have a whole bunch of products there, to improve people's sex life. One of them is a set of depth limiting rings from a company called Onut on there. So if you're listening to this and you're like, ooh, that sounds like something that would work for me, you can do that. I think you might have some that you'll promote later on, at least a company that you're working with. So we'll let you share that with people in a little bit as well. But the idea is just know that there are things out there, right? There are aids out there that can help you and make this work better.
Yeah, it's still obviously a niche situation. There's not a ton of stuff, but obviously over my life, I've just picked up various tips and tricks. And the more you explore with women or men, depending on your preference, then the more you understand how much they can typically take, how much warming up kind of needs to happen. It still varies, obviously, on the partner, but generally exercise, on the side of caution. So there's better to do too much than too little.
Yes, absolutely. Do you find that certain positions work better for you from just purely from a size perspective?
I think, especially if it's the first time or early times in the relationship, I think it's them giving them the most control. I think is key. There's some danger with that in terms of if they're doing all the work and they've got to deal with the size as well, that could be too much. But if they're positioned where they're comfortable and kind of positioned in a way that they can kind of relax, but also control entry, those tend to be the best, I think, typically. Mm-hmm. Other than that, some of the reverse ones where you are sort of holding them and being very slow and gentle and deliberate with it is key. I think it's just ones where you can't go too wrong, I think. And also it's like standing is surprisingly good as well, because when you're that kind of extra length, it's a bit easier to do various things from that angle. And it's something a bit different that often a lot of women haven't tried and to enjoy.
Yeah, standing positions for people with smaller penises actually tend to be rather challenging. So that could be a really good one if you are larger.
Because you can kind of support them as well. Because if you've got the size and you're already in there, you can kind of take a lot of that brunt, but they also have some control over exactly what's happening.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any other advice for men with large penises when it comes to sex? Anything else that you've learned? Anything else you want to share or impart to them?
Yeah, my advice is always sort of have a little bag of some kind, just with all your tools in them. Bring your own lube, bring your own condoms, because you might not be with a partner and they pull out a normal sized pair, and then you can't really do anything with that. You just make sure you got something. So wherever you are, you can always, you don't feel like you're being cockblocked by not having the right tools and everything. So I think just being, something either in the house or if you're going to someone else's, just devote the time to that. Realistically, it's worth doing.
Yeah, that would be a shame if you were cock blocked by your own cock.
Exactly. Metaphysical.
but
Yeah.
but that's a really good suggestion, one that I hadn't thought about, which is, yeah, to really have a bag with all the things that you need that make it possible. And that's something that, a regular normal size guy wouldn't have to think
Yeah.
about, because now, granted, I fully recommend that if you are a man and you're going to be having sex with a woman, that you take responsibility and make sure you have things like condoms with you and all of that. But in a pinch, if you don't, she's most likely going to have something that will work perfectly fine. But
Yeah.
when you're much larger, that's not going to be the
You
case.
can't run to the pharmacy and grab something easily necessarily either, depending on how extreme you are and what the stock's like. So
Yeah, I imagine not. I mean, that's interesting because,
you have like the Trojan Magnums and stuff, but a lot of that is more of a marketing thing. But they're not. It's larger than average, but it's not
but not
significantly
much.
larger.
I
Yeah,
mean, I'm
exactly.
not that large and I can wear a Magnum and it fits
Yeah,
just fine and it doesn't
exactly.
fall off. It's actually quite comfortable, but I'm
Yeah,
not that large. And I always think, like, what do men that have really large penises
yeah,
do? Because I don't see anything bigger than that in the store.
yeah. Not in the store, but they do sell them online at least. But even then, they're not. The biggest one that's available now is a bit under 10 inches in length. But obviously, you're not really inserting much more than that
Mm.
anyway. On average, typically, it's very rare to get more than that in. And then the girth kind of goes up to sort of 8ish anyway, so you're kind of covered with that. But it's not ideal. But also, you just get more used to wearing them tighter than you'd expect. Like,
Yeah.
again, if you're a smaller man wearing a normal size condom, you're more used to them being loose. So there's obviously a lot of ability to accommodate and get used to that.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, the thing that you need to keep in mind is that it's going to take a little bit more planning. It's going to take a little bit more forethought,
Yeah,
because you can't just run to a pharmacy. She's not going to have something that's going to work for you, right?
yeah,
So you got to think a little bit ahead. If you are, larger, significantly larger, and you're going to have to prepare. You're going to order the stuff you need online. You're going to put
yep.
that bag together, and then of course you're going to do the other things that we talked about as well, with the foreplay and all of that. So I think those are excellent tips for any man that's out there that's like, hey, I struggle with how to really make this work well.
Yeah. And the other bit of advice is obviously don't make it, it could be something you're known for, but don't make it your only, only selling point.
Right, right. Have some other skills
Yeah,
in addition
exactly.
to just
Yeah,
the fact that you have a large
exactly.
penis. That
You
is
get your foot in the
also
door sometimes, but you need to have a reason to stay there. So.
absolutely, that is also great advice. All right. Well, Matt, I want to thank you for coming on the show. It's been a really fascinating conversation, and I want to give you an opportunity. I know that you came on to specifically promote something, so I want to give you an opportunity to do that. Talk about, what that is, and
Sure. So I'm here to tell you about my autobiography. It's going to hopefully come out either late this year or early next year, or a long story, Life with the World's Biggest Penis. It's going to be not just practical sex advice. It's mostly about, well, partly some very stories from my life, which vary from the ridiculous and silly to the more serious, dramatic, and a sociological look at how the penis sizes has been reflected in the media. So stuff like Boogie Nights and how that spread a certain image of things, and the lad magazines of the 90s and onwards, and Stern and all these people up to the present day, and how the increased female voices have changed the impact. Maybe we're at the point now where people realize that size isn't the be all end all, and is how does that impact us? How's that impacted me as someone living from my point of view? So hopefully that'll be an interesting book for everyone once it's been published. I'm also doing some work with a company called Fleshy, and you can visit them at getfleshy.com. They are very keen advocates of men knowing their bodies and what to do with them, basically. So they do lots of sort of toys for men. They're working on something currently, which I think will be out very soon, which is sort of almost works like a VR type thing, where you can sync it to a device, so you can get pleasure in time with whatever you're watching. So people who are into that sort of thing, give them a look.
all right, all right. So you have your autobiography coming out, right? And then, of course, the fleshy stuff, and links for those will be in the description. So look for those. Any last things you want to share, Matt?
No, I think the last thing I should probably say is obviously in the end, it doesn't matter too much. And always, when we have a long interview, especially, it's like, well, is that all that's to you? It's like, well, no, it's just a slice of life. Obviously, most of the time you're not erect, you're not thinking about sex. It's just a part of your body like anything else, and you wouldn't be obsessed with your little life. Wouldn't be devoted to your kneecap or something. It's just part of your anatomy. You got to deal with it. People are gonna have reactions to it. Whether you're big, small, even if you're normal, people might just say, "Hi, you're already small," whatever. So you never get the one you want. You got to work with what you've got, and yeah, just keep on trucking with it.
That's great advice. It's really grounded, and yeah, I think it applies to everybody from the really small to the really large. Don't overly focus on it. It's just a part of your body like anything else. And then you do the best you can. You find ways to work with it, whichever end of the spectrum that you're on.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, Matt, I want to thank you for coming on the show. Like I said, fascinating conversation. And I think, I do this work for a living. And so I've spoken with other men with large penises and small penises. So I'm kind of familiar, but I think for the audience, a lot of what we talked about today and shared today was probably new to them and probably fairly enlightening. So I really hope that people got some value out of it and took some good advice away from the show.
Yeah, I always get messages from people either on both ends, realistically, to say, give me some advice, or I'm a bit like this, whatever, or what's it like, or why, trying to get different opinions. So I've got a website at biggestpenisbook.com, and you can always email with questions if you've got anything that wasn't covered here.
Awesome. Sounds amazing.
Great.
All right, everybody. That's all the time I have for this episode, and I will see you next week. I hope you liked this episode of the Love Lab podcast. If you enjoy this show, subscribe, leave me a review, and share it with your friends. And for more free exclusive content, join me in the Passion Vault at kevinanthonycoaching.com/vault. That's kevinanthonycoaching.com/vault. Thanks for listening. And remember, as Celine used to say, you're amazing.